Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Courage. It's one of those words that is easy to say but harder to demonstrate. I mention that word today for many reasons. First, I wanted you to know that the goal of Renegade Thinkers Unite is to give you the courage to be a renegade thinker by learning from the successes and failures of others. It takes courage to cut through the crap. It really does. It takes courage to zig when others zag. It takes courage to focus, to make things better even if they ain't broke. It takes courage to reject mediocrity, hyperbole, and conventional wisdom. And it takes courage to ask if your analysis of successful marketers hold water. And that's what exactly we're going to be doing today, because I've been talking for a long time about what I think it takes to be a successful marketer based on all the interviews that I've done. But my guest today is not a marketer herself. In fact, she's responsible for advising and placing marketers in senior roles at some of the world's biggest companies. So if anybody knows what it takes to be a successful CMO today, it would be Kristi Maynor, who is the head of U.S. Chief Marketing Officer and Digital Transformation Practice at Egon Zehnder. And if you don't know Egon Zehnder, you are probably not a senior marketing executive because they're one of the largest and have one of the best reputations in the world. So, Kristi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drew. Thanks for having me.
So, at first, you published a lovely note to your daughter, Rhett, about leadership. Is there a story behind that?
Is there a story behind that? Yes. So, I was asked to write that letter, and I sat on it for at least a month because I couldn't figure out what to say. And I wrote that letter on the spur of the moment when we were actually headed out of town for a quick spring break trip with my family. And she was snuggled up in my lap. She's 1 year old, just to give you a sense. And I have an older two boys, 6-year-old and 8-year-old. And she was snuggled up in my lap. And I was just inspired. I was inspired looking to the left and seeing my husband. And I have to describe to you, when we were darting out the door to get to the airport, I was a mess. I had forgotten a bunch of stuff. And my husband had remembered two very important things to her: her stuffed animal and the milk. And so often I hear people say the mom is the one that always remembers those things. And you can go to a moment where you think, man, if I'm not remembering it, I must be a bad mom. And instead, I saw that moment. I saw my husband remembering her bottle and her stuffed animal. And I was just so thankful that I had this amazing support system around me.
So I have one bit of advice for you on that front. And
Okay.
This is going to sound crazy, but do nothing for your children.
I've heard that before, and I'm not that good at taking that advice, but I fully believe it.
So, and I don't mean do nothing in the sense of, don't give them any opportunity, but what I mean is make them do stuff. Make them make their beds, make them cook. I always tell the story, my mom stopped cooking when I was in high school. So I had to learn to cook, and, my kids didn't. So I sort of look at it and I go, missed that opportunity. So anyway, enough about kids. Let's talk a little bit. You spent a few years at P&G, and it's a company that a lot of folks still believe is a leader in the field of marketing. When you look back at your days at P&G, was there a marketer or a campaign that you thought at the time was particularly courageous?
So I'll tell you just a bit about my history at P&G. I worked agency side with Procter for about 6 years, primarily in their beauty organization, doing a lot of work with the Secret deodorant brand, actually. And then I actually joined Procter and went brand side and had a different experience with them. But yes, I'll point directly to a mentor of mine at the time and has continued to be so, Kevin Hochman. He was my client at Procter and Gamble when I was agency side, and he was really amazing at giving a very crystal clear view of the business, making tough decisions, and taking risks. And today he's the president at KFC. And if you've watched them in the marketplace, he's doing the same things there.
And it's interesting you chose the word risks, because obviously that's a tricky one, but it's very hard to succeed. And you don't always think of Procter as taking risks. So I suspect there's a lot of process that goes into it to make sure that these are smart risks.
There are. And I think it's a couple of things I've picked up. One is creating a context where it's not as much a risk and a failure as it is an experiment. And I think that's what he did very well. And Procter does very well, especially on the brands where you see them taking a little bit more risky choices. But you still have to have 90% of your plan baked in a very solid, defendable marketing plan and business plan. But having that baked gives you that opportunity to experiment. And so I think he did that quite well, and I experienced that a lot on those brands.
My conclusion, and this came after I wrote the CMO's periodic table, Renegade's Guide to Marketing, which featured interviews with 64 CMOs, and at that point I'd probably interviewed 100 or so. I've since probably close to 200 now. And I've identified this, that the successful CMOs are what I call cool cats. And that CATS is an acronym for courageous, artful, thoughtful, and scientific. So let's start with the first one of those and see if when you look at CMOs, does courage even make it into the top 5 list when you're evaluating marketers for an open position?
It does. So
you're just saying that to be nice on my show.
No. I'm going to tell you specifically about a conversation I had last week. We hosted a summit earlier this week for CMOs in partnership with Northwestern University. And in going into it, I and my colleagues here at Egon Zehnder interviewed a whole host of CEOs, CHROs, CTOs, everyone in the C-suite, to ask them this question of what they need from their CMO. And one of the quotes was a good CMO has to be ready to take personal risk.
There you go. So you see, I'm not just making this stuff up here, folks. They did a study on it, and that, which is very cool. And the key here is, and anytime I talk to a CMO who did take a big risk and got away with it, is the CEO had their back, right? I mean, that's the key. You can't just you can't be courageous in an environment where there isn't support for courage, right?
Yes, no, that's very, very true. That's why it's so important for leaders today to set the right context.
So what else is, I'll go through my other things later on, but what is on the top of your list when, an opening comes up and you're trying to find the right CMO for a particular position? But when you look at the ones that have been successful, what's on the top of your list in terms of characteristics of these individuals?
Curiosity. When I think about assessing a CMO to see whether they can tackle a specific business challenge that a client of mine has, I recognize that the job they're walking into is more than likely not one they've experienced before. Exactly. And also the job that they will have in 18 months will be quite different given the level of disruption that we have across almost every industry, especially in consumer. And so we focus heavily on potential. And there are 4 elements of potential that I could talk to you about, but what I would say the most important one, especially for a marketer, is curiosity. And this is the insatiable desire to learn. And that means learning about the outside world, but that also means internal reflection and self-development and being able to ask the hard questions about yourself to learn how to improve and to improve over time.
And I love that. And, in one of the sort of buckets of characteristics that I've identified, artful and thoughtful, part of the thoughtfulness is you can't be thoughtful if you're not listening. And, listening is for the curious. You don't listen if you're incurious, right? You simply don't because you know it all. And it's funny because we both spent a lot of time with CMOs recently. I was at a summit as well. And there were two female CMOs that had been promoted. And what was amazing about both of these individuals were how thoughtful, curious, and humble they were. And yet one was the CEO and the other was a general manager of $1 billion division of a very large company that is like 98% men. And so I think that curiosity thing, that has to run very deep. And I'll just do a shout out to Beth Comstock, who always talked about spending 25% of her time out of the office, learning from customers, learning from vendors, learning from potential partners, and just seemed to be someone who was infinitely curious.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a good time to take a break. So
okay.
And we'll be right back. Hey, it's Drew. I wanted to use this break to ask you a single question. Are you a courageous marketer? Do you have the courage to go to your board of directors and say, marketing could drive the growth of this company? We just need 3 times the budget. Do you have the courage to take the big idea that you already have and extend it internally and externally through influencers, through the media, through all of your content? If you're a courageous marketer but aren't sure how to roadmap all of this, I have a big idea for you. It's called Renegade Thinking. It's a program that we've developed and work with exclusively for B2B marketers, generally at large companies. And I want to give you my cell phone, 917-679-8852. Just text Renegade Thinking to 917-679-8852, and we can talk about how you can cut through. Okay, we're back, and my guest is Kristi Maynor, who is the head of the U.S. Chief Marketing Officer and Digital Transformation Practice at Egon Zehnder. And let's talk a little bit more about the modern marketer. And I see that the role keeps expanding. And I'm very curious from your standpoint, what should a CMO aspire to be responsible for versus what they start out being responsible for?
This is certainly a hot topic. As I often say, the CMO role is the most bespoke in the C-suite. And I think if you survey 100 CMOs, their roles are different. And oftentimes that's by design. Sometimes it's based on talent. So there is a lot of debate in this area. I think the concept of the modern marketer is continuing to emerge. And the way that I think about the modern marketer, this is someone who can balance the brand marketing aspects of a business as well as the performance marketing aspects, really driving it through the full funnel through to conversion. And what's difficult about this for a marketer today is that those two skill sets have been honed in very different types of organizations and frankly geographically even. So you think about a Procter and Gamble like we talked about earlier and Unilever and Kraft who have been tremendous brand marketers and developers of brand marketing talent over the years. And then you think about these startups, the technology-centric organizations on the East Coast who start with the data and are very focused on driving people through the funnel. It's just a very different mindset. And the best talent, and I think the talent that we'll see emerge over the next few years as modern marketers truly will have a blend of those two. They'll have 5 years in brand marketing, they'll have 5 years in performance marketing, and that powerhouse combination is what we will all look at. It's difficult to find that today, frankly, because that transferring of talent has not happened as often.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if it is actually doable. And let me explain. I think that from a personality, if we had Myers-Briggs in front of us, I think you would find that the really good performance marketer is in one quadrant and the really good brand marketer is in another quadrant. And
yes.
And those twains don't necessarily meet. So the way I look at it, and when I sort of talk to CMOs who want to do both, is make a decision. Are you going to be the visionary, or are you going to be the sort of the tactician or the integrator? And if you're going to be the visionary, then you better have this performance marketer underneath you, right? But the notion that this individual could do both, I think it's problematic. And, this is what I find, and I think it is the difference between, sort of West Coast, East Coast, or however you want to look at it. But I also think in B2B, you find a lot more CMOs who are performance-driven marketers than you do who are brand-driven marketers. And
right.
Now, first I want to ask you this, and because I have lots of questions about this, but from a professional success standpoint, in some of the people that you've placed, who does better? The idea person or the...
It all depends on the situation.
Okay.
And
that's fine. That's a good cop out.
It all depends on the business situation, Drew.
Yeah.
But no, what I would say to you, because I want to go back to your point just a second ago, which was that the same person can't do these equally well. And I think there's something to that. But the challenge is if they've not been deeply exposed to it and they're not predisposed naturally, given the way their brain works, to think about the other one, then it's tremendously hard for them to lead an organization.
Totally agree.
That can do both of those. So that's why I think this exposure aspect is really critical.
Exposure and respect for
Absolutely.
the roles. And
exactly.
I think that's the tricky part is you've got all these levers. Which ones do you pull? And I mean, I've seen this and this is crazy and probably not your world because I'm dealing with some CMOs who don't have as big budgets as some of these huge companies that you place people in. But I'll see them spend $1 million on their tech stack and they'll have less than $1 million left over for marketing. And you go, so they said, okay, it's all about performance marketing, but then they forgot about this thing called awareness and reach and penetration. And so I think it's easier in a B2B environment. And this came up in conversations at the summit I was at, the CMO Club summit I was at this week, was that it's easier to sell in the tech to their boss than it is an idea.
Well, it's certainly easier to sell in the ROI of the tech to their boss.
Well, the promise of the ROI, but you get the software, you get a marketing automation, you get an ABM, you add something on, you build, obviously everybody has Salesforce and you add all these things in, then you realize I need an extra body for every single one of them easily to make sure that we execute it right. So if you add up all of that cost and then you still only have a little tiny bit of money for outreach, I don't know where that ROI is.
So a couple of things I'll call out as an example. Best Buy.
Yes.
Could we agree that Best Buy is outperforming the market when it looks at retail?
And I'm all in. I'm all ears. Talk to me.
Okay. You're all in on Best Buy. So let's think about Best Buy today. 5 years ago, they were investing heavily in building their data stack. And it probably took, I don't know all the specifics, but it probably took them a good 2 to 3 years to start to really get the payoff of that. And so it's an investment that absolutely has to be made. And sometimes there are sacrifices that have to be made in the short term, but they will position Best Buy and has positioned Best Buy for a much stronger top to bottom connection with me as a customer.
And I think that's the point. And that's the key thing that I want to make sure that we're talking about the same stuff, because I think any bit of data that you can capture as a marketer that goes for the purpose of improving customer experience is money really well spent. Because as long as the customer benefits from it, chances are that, because Best Buy doesn't have an awareness issue, right? They have a channel issue is that, let's face it, it's just easier to buy stuff on Amazon than it is to go in the store. So for them to win, if they can win at all, is by offering a superior customer service where somehow or other these salespeople actually have, in an ideal world would be able to identify you and what your needs are and what your shopping experience has had. And, they have little Google glasses that show them what they are. And then without being creepy, say, we have this app that will allow you to virtually look at your room like IKEA does, and we can put this TV set to see if it fits in there. Does that sound like a good plan? That's where they need to go with data and customer experience. But I digress here.
No, you're right.
And that's pretty cool. And I think again, that's different than simply buying a marketing automation platform and buying, say, account-based marketing, which is another platform that folks, this is a pet peeve of mine. And I was joking with one of the largest makers of this stuff that I wanted to blow up the marketing tech stack and just start again.
Yes.
Because it's such a mess for the marketer. And it hasn't necessarily led to a better customer experience, in the B2B world.
In the B2B world, absolutely. I see that. And I guess I would just also point to companies like Domino's, though, who the deep investments they made on the data tech platforms to get all of their point of sales aligned, to be able to follow that customer through the entire journey of placing the order and then having it delivered to their home. The investments they made there 5 to 8 years ago are what really are setting them apart today.
And I wouldn't disagree at all. My question is that the job of the CMO? Or is it the job of the CMO to have the vision to say, we want to deliver an incredible experience based on X? You know, we're Walgreens and we're the most convenient place in the world, right? That's their hedgehog concept. And then say to data guy, hey, data guy, deliver that vision via point of sale and deliver it via, I just don't know where the CMO's role in what you're describing as data enhanced customer experience.
And that's where it comes down to being the most bespoke role. I would say that at Domino's, their marketing team certainly played a big role in defining that customer experience and helping to make those investments over the last 8 years.
Is there a point in your mind where the CMO just has too much on their plate?
Yes. We talked about this earlier this week, and it's very, very difficult to do. But I often hear from marketers, I want to own this. I need to own the full customer experience if I'm going to have the impact that I want to have. I think the best marketers don't feel the need to own it all, but really feel the need and are able to inspire it.
Yeah, exactly. And see, and that, so I think I'm going to take another break, but I want to come right back and talk about this because I think you just hit on the core that really helps this crystallize, at least in my mind. So, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Drew. I have a question for you, the audience. How good is your content? We all believe in content marketing, but is your content good enough for you to share it with the CEO and want him to share it with his peers? Is it good enough for your salespeople to share with their prospects? Heck, is it good enough for you to share it with your mom? If the answer to all of those questions was no, well, it's not that good, and you're also celebrating things like National Donut Day, it's probably a good idea to do a content audit. And I know just the person to help you out with that. Text content audit to 917-679-8852. That's actually my cell phone. And we can talk about how to get your content to be world class and do all the things that you know it should be able to do. So you can text content audit to 917-679-8852. And let's figure out together how to get your content to cut through. Okay, we're back, and my guest is Kristi Maynor, who's the head of CMO and digital transformation practice at Egon Zehnder. And we've been talking about the ever-expanding role of the CMO and this battle between the need to be the brand champion and the performance-driven marketer. And I wanted to sort of put a punctuation point on what we were just talking about, where Kristi was mentioning things like at Domino's, the CMO helped lead the customer experience and the use of data. My feeling, and I want to debate this a little bit, my feeling is if the CMO knows brand and establishes brand, then and champions brand, and by brand I mean an idea that could be a rallying cry internally and externally. If they do that, then they don't have to control everything, but they do have to sort of, if you will, police and make sure that all of it is consistent. And so that's my sort of feeling about this ever expanding role of the brand. And am I just sort of in fantasy land here, Kristi, or is that a doable situation?
No, that was a key takeaway. I mentioned earlier that we surveyed a bunch of executives and asked about how marketers can build trust in the C-suite. And one of the big takeaways is that the marketer is in the most unique position in the C-suite to be a bridge builder. Today's marketer does have so much data, they have so much insight, and the best ones have this tremendous skill at listening and understanding. And when that is employed effectively in the C-suite, you can be this bridge builder. You can bring out new insights that will help operations do their job better, will help technology connect better with the customer, and in effect make everyone in the C-suite even more customer facing through your insight. So to me, that is the role of the marketer, is to be that bridge builder.
Exactly. And again, I think this is true whether you run you're the CEO of a small company and have to be the marketer too, or you're a CMO at a Fortune 100 company. You have the opportunity in the C-suite as a CMO, or the head of marketing, or the only person in marketing, to create something, an idea that is so powerful that everyone in the company gets excited about coming to work. And that is an incredible opportunity. And that's why I love marketing. I mean, and again, I've used this example on the show many times, and I'm grateful that Jackson from Box.com served it up on the show. But their two words are delivering joy. And in those two words, you get the idea of what the company does. They deliver stuff. But it isn't stuff, it's joy. And so if you tell an employee, we're in the delivering joy business, that employee knows, oh, I'll write a handwritten note in the box and that will be good. Or the CEO will know, I've got an employee who can't afford to pay for their wedding. I'll pay for the wedding. So that the boss just delivered joy. And then when it comes to the customers, that external facing thing is also there. So I feel like that you need the courage as a CMO to take the reins and find something that will inspire employees and the customer and hopefully your future. And if that comes from data and insights, that's even better. How's that?
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect way of putting it, Drew.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. I'm going to attempt to wrap this up. But before, I thought when you look at the role in the future of the role of CMOs, what sort of advice do you give to people who are, say, at a VP of marketing level and looking to sort of get what is it? What advice are you giving them?
We've already hit on this concept of really getting 5 and 5, brand experience, performance experience. I think another key piece of advice I often give to people at that VP level and they're looking to make that big next move is don't focus on the title, focus on the impact you'll be able to have.
You need to be able to come back with a story, right? Because you're building your personal brand as you go along, and you need to make sure there is a story that holds together that says, when I was at this thing, we started here and it was really in bad shape and we did this and now it's in good shape. And by the way, here's the data that backs it up, which is why the last characteristic in my mind of a great CMO is it's the scientific. I think it all falls. You can have all the courage in the world, but if you don't have any data to support your achievements, you're kind of going to fail. So this has really been an interesting conversation. We've talked about what it takes to be a successful marketer in general and a CMO in specific. And Kristi offered the word curiosity, which I think is great. And I'm assuming that all of you listeners have that because otherwise you wouldn't be listening. You would just be doing your job. So I don't need to dwell on that. I love the point that Kristi made that is that you need to, in your career, you need to balance these two. And I think a lot of CMOs are saying the same thing, the art and the science of marketing. You have to understand these. You may not want to do them, but you really have to understand them and know how to pull those levers. And I think that's a really important part of the development of CMOs. And as I think about this, Kristi, one of the last questions that I have for you is, why is it that very few CMOs ended up as CEOs?
It's a great question, Drew, and it's one that I often help CMOs think through. The advice I give is that you absolutely have to have P&L experience. And that can come in a variety of ways. If you started in a CPG organization, you can get general management roles there. If you're a marketer and you have the opportunity to expand into own an e-commerce P&L, that can be another way to get it. But really having that true P&L experience is key. The other important aspect for a marketer to ascend to that level is to be able to tell a truly transformational story. And so this piece of advice around taking the role that can help you with impact and transformation is something you need along that path. But I think it's that simple. You need to get P&L experience and be able to tell that transformational business impact story.
And, with that, we can circle right back to the first word I started this show with, which is courage. You have to have the courage. In order to transform something, typically you have to walk into a business that isn't doing well. And that takes courage, right? And then you have to have the chutzpah, the courage to walk into the CEO's office and said, you know what? We got to pivot. We got to pivot hard. Right, left, center, whatever it is, we're going to have to do it. And we're all going to have to rally behind it. And not every bit of it is going to be, some of it's going to be a leap of faith, because sometimes these big ideas are, one of my favorite stories in marketing is when the CEO of, Aflac, saw the duck campaign, for the first time, and presented it to the board and said, yeah, we're gonna use a duck to sell, our insurance. And, you can imagine that moment, that leap of faith. And, meanwhile, 10 years later or 20 years later, their competition is 4 times smaller than they are, because it was such a big transformational idea. So, anyway, Kristi, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been amazing talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Drew. It was fun.
And and to my listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, do me a huge favor and share it with a friend, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. I'm grateful to you for listening. And speaking of courage, my cell phone number is 917-679-8852. And you can feel free to text me what's on your mind. So in the meantime, keep those Renegade Thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.